Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast, Bone Bootcamp with Sarah Purcell. I'm your host, Sarah. This podcast, my newsletter, and all of my programs are designed to help women approach aging with confidence and courage. I'm specifically focused on bone growth promotion and skeleton-safe movements in Bone Bootcamp, the course, and Short and Sweet with Sarah, the membership. In this podcast, I strive to bring you all the most current information on living your best life as you age. Let's get on with today's episode. Hi, welcome to the second episode of Bone Bootcamp with Sarah Purcell. This is my first live guest, and it's really fitting that it's Katy Lush, an old friend who was my first Pilates master trainer. Welcome, Katy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to allow you to introduce yourself and just tell my audience a little bit about who you are, and we can even talk about how we met.
Oh gosh. Yeah, so who am I? In a professional sense, I am a Pilates and gyrotonic and restorative exercise instructor. I've owned a studio in downtown Chicago for about 17 years and used to host teacher trainings through Pilates and gyrotonics, so that's how you and I met.
Yes.
And pretty certain we figured out it was through Physical Mind a long time ago. I was a teacher trainer with them first. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so much like, I feel like our careers have kind of taken similar paths. We both kind of started with a strong foundation in Pilates, but then have sort of shifted into a little bit more of the natural movement arena. And so I find I'm living in this gray area of, I still teach Pilates and I still teach gyrotonic, but the restorative exercise is now the foundation of everything that I teach. That's just a little different.
Yeah. And we both took, I didn't finish. I took the first year of Katy Bowman's training.
Right.
So we were on that path together, and we really studied biomechanics and alignment side by side. And that was probably my first experience with long-distance learning. And now we're also good at it.
I know. It's funny you say that. You're absolutely right. I remember it was a little bit of a learning curve to learn virtually, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Now it's becoming the norm.
Yeah, now it seems so easy, and why weren't we doing it before? Right. But in that whole process, I went off to look more at the pelvic floor, and you became a restorative exercise specialist, and it is for that reason that I love talking to you, and I want to talk to you about your approach to natural movement, which is really what Katy Bowman, who started all of this for you and I, and maybe actually she didn't. I think we have a story. You have a story about Philip Beach.
Oh, right. Yeah. So exactly. My friend and colleague, we were going to a balanced body conference like we do every year to get our, continuing education credits. And he was like, I basically asked him, what, workshop are you wanting to attend this year? And he was like, I'm going to go to Philip Beach. And I was like, who's that? Let me, I'll go too.
Yeah, why not?
Basically, at this point, it's like, why not? It sounded like something new and different. And I knew nothing about Philip Beach and his work. And his work aligns a lot with Katy Bowman, where he trains Olympic athletes, natural movement processes to help build, bigger leaps in strength. And he studies embryology and acupuncture and has this gigantic book. And he's just one of the wisest people I've ever met about this information. And so I'm in his workshop and I know nothing about him, and there's no chairs. And I'm kind of like, where are the chairs? Did they forget to set up this pre-conference room? So I go find a chair and I go sit on it. And then as he's lecturing, I'm understanding that he's into floor sitting and barefoot walking. And so I'm sliding myself off the chair so I don't look absolutely ridiculous. Then I'm taking my notes on the chair. And then we're all taking our shoes off eventually. So it was a very humbling workshop because for the movement portion of it, there was so much of it that I was physically unable to do.
Right.
And having had this, movement background for like 20 years, I was a bit appalled. Like, there were so many gaps in my repertoire of what I couldn't do, and a lot of holes, I think, in the education that I'd learned. That when I was at that conference, I had another colleague who said, "Oh, he's a lot like Katy Bowman," and I was like, "Who's that?" Right. And then I ended up just researching her and kind of going down that road because she offered a certification and some continuing education.
Right.
So,
yeah. And interestingly, I had read Philip Beach's book when you brought it up to me, but I had not read Katy Bowman yet. And you're the one who brought it up. Funny. And that's when I went in with you for the ride. And
that's so funny. I have his book and I have yet to finish it.
And
it's so thick and dense.
I know. Yeah. I'm that nerdy person who is like plowing through books.
Good for you. It's hard. It's a thick read.
I know, but I didn't get to meet him. So you got me on that one.
Yeah, fair.
But the interesting thing is that really gave us both this insight into what is alignment and why is what we maybe learned in Pilates, yoga, or gyrotonics not the same as what we're learning now. And I think for me that was eye-opening and really changed. It assisted me heavily as I got into dealing with my osteoporosis. That if I wasn't loading my hips, no wonder my hips were getting thinner, so to speak, less dense. So changing that was a huge thing. Figuring out what exactly am I loading when I'm doing this. And I think you and I have exchanged stories of how our clients will talk about maybe knee pain when they're doing a squat. And now through this new lens, you and I might approach it differently.
No, I completely agree. I think what's been so interesting in this whole process is if you've been teaching movement for any period of time under one particular umbrella and you have aging clients. I mean, I had clients starting in their 40s and now they're in their 60s. Right. So things change, right? Like they're probably postmenopausal, maybe they've had a torn rotator cuff or you've just I've watched their bodies adjust and change. And so philosophically, I've had to adjust and change to sort of match them. And so I had to deliberately veer away from some of the choreographic choices that my umbrellas were falling under because it wasn't appropriate anymore. And honestly, I wasn't really seeing all these major gains that these other umbrellas like promised. Right. So when I came up on Philip Beach and Katy Bowman and any sort of natural movement background, the underlyingness is sort of like the accessibility of it. And I 100% hook, line, and sinker believe that that's the most important thing. Like a movement has to be accessible before, then it can be effective. Right. right. And then so on and so forth.
Right. And the same way I now teach yoga as well. And if I'm looking at, for instance, a triangle pose, I never teach the yoga alignment because it's not necessarily accessible and certainly can be quite difficult with 62-year-old hips, which I have.
Right. It's one of my big things for my clients is I try to get them like onto the floor to get off the floor. Right. Just one time, not as like an exercise, but I like deliberately do a little warm up on the ground. And then we move to the equipment so that they have one opportunity where they're forced to work on getting to the floor and back up in like this safe environment. Because, there's so much in Pilates and yoga that's sitting on the ground. And if somebody can't do that with ease, I'm not going to give them those movements.
Yeah. And so we're talking about the studio setting, and it just sort of naturally flows for me to think about how excellent restorative exercise specialists like yourself are at getting those natural movements into everyday life. And so that's what I really wanted to talk about.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I do love the phrase that Katy Bowman has where she calls it like stacking your life. I think it's a really, she has like a Venn diagram of it in her book, but I sometimes call it layering your life for whatever reason. I like the alliteration.
I like it.
But no, it's this, it was a philosophy that struck me really hard when I had my son and he was a baby. And I was also a very avid gym goer. And I had this like internal conflict of it felt weird to leave him at home either with a sitter or my husband or take him to the daycare and go and work out for an hour. And I like couldn't figure out how to sort of like meld the two. It just never seemed to work for me. I always prioritized wanting to spend more time with him instead. And again, no judgment to any person who uses the daycare services because they're amazing.
Right.
But for whatever reason, it just didn't settle with me properly. So Katy Bowman's thought process, which I think is kind of brilliant, and I'm sure other people think this too, is you just take all the things that you're trying to get done in one day and you find opportunities where you layer them or stack them in such a way that you're checking off multiple boxes with one sort of activity. So I stopped going to the gym and instead I put my son either, in the stroller or in like a little carrier and I started going for walks outside. So I was getting nature time, some sunshine, some vitamin D. I was carrying him, so he was heavy, and I was getting some movement and some exercise. So I love that idea, and I really try hard to think about that even now today. I mean, we're always like wanting more time, right? That's like the most precious resource. And so I find the only way to like get all the boxes checked is to like find these opportunities to kind of layer things that we need to get done.
Yeah. And I started calling it a kitchen scavenger hunt. And I didn't really mean for it to only be in the kitchen, but that throughout your house, you can find opportunities for the things that you did, for instance, in your exercise advent. So I thought maybe you could tell the viewers about your exercise advent. Yeah,
so assuming this is probably post-Christmas time, but so I followed this exercise advent, and it was, the theme this year was about rotation or twisting. And it was, one exercise a day, and I got really silly with it where, the exercise of choice was good, but I always kind of tweaked it to, something that I felt was more applicable to me and the way that my lifestyle is. So, again, it's just really simple things like playing around with like rotating your forearm back and forth. And there was a lot of spinal motion built into it that was really fun. But it was all kind of, I call it like pedestrian moves, right? Like nothing was so far out the box. Like a lot of it was like a seated twist, like you would back up in the car. And because we have rear view cameras, we're sort of even losing that as an option of movement. And so we kind of have to like force ourselves to do it now. So it was a fun, like, I think it was like a 24-day daily videos. They're all on my Instagram if you want to go back and find them, and they're all labeled. There were some that I hated, so I listed this as the exercise that I hate. But just all different ways to play around with rotation and twisting in your whole body. And again, all very accessible.
Yeah. And we'll have your Instagram account in the show notes so people can look that up, because I followed you doing it and I thought it looked really
It was fun.
And I did most of them.
It was really fun.
Yeah. So when you are just in your everyday life, how do you layer beyond what you've just told us?
Ooh, that's a good question. How do I layer? It's so funny because it's so ingrained in my daily routine at this point. I have to like think about. So I do have a very specific way I sit in the car. And some people will put like some pillowing or some padding in the bucket seat. I tilt mine really far forward and I make sure that my left foot is on the flat pad that's on the floor, so that when I'm sitting, my pelvis is relatively square and slightly tipped forward. That's a big thing for me. And the backrest is quite upright as long as the headrest is not pushing my head forward.
So is mine.
Right. We got a newer car, and it's like perfect because it's like further back, and I'm like, amazing. I don't even touch it. We definitely do lots of walking. I'll do family walks with my kids. And when I do it, I'm almost always in a barefoot minimal shoe. And I try to walk on natural terrain as much as I can. So even if we follow the sidewalks, we always tend to step like off onto the parkway or pedway. And just to get some of those like variations in texture and some tree roots and some rocks and some changes in my feet that I wouldn't get otherwise, just being kind of on flat and level sidewalks. I feel like those are the two
so good.
Two major biggies.
The big ones. Yeah. And what do your clients tend to do as their nutritious movement that they might find in their home?
Ooh.
Do they report back?
If they have some of the props, like the half foam roller, everybody loves the calf stretch. For whatever reason, that sticks with most people. They tend to do that one a lot. And I tell them to put it somewhere that it's either like in the bathroom or the kitchen where it's obvious and you're going to be standing there. So then you just kind of put your foot on it.
Right.
The one thing that I think is really cute is just the standing alignment of kind of like what you're talking about with loading your hips with osteoporosis, of just teaching people to kind of back their weight up a little bit in their heels when they are standing. And then saying when you're standing, you know, at the grocery store standing in line, or some of my clients live in high rises, so they take the elevator and they're like, I was standing in the elevator yesterday and I was backing my hips up, and I'm like, that's so good. So I think those tiny little like mindfulness moments, I think, you know, are the most impactful because it's something that they remember to do on their own. I think it's impactful, you know? So I would say more things along those lines, the alignment. Right.
Yeah. And do you talk to your clients about rolling on balls?
Yeah, you know, like that, exactly. I over the holidays, for whatever reason, I was like sending links out excessively for like some body rolling. You know, I've never gone through like a traditional course in it, but I know a lot of it, just having taken a lot of classes and things. And self-massage is so important, especially right now, since a lot of people can't really go and get a massage. And so, I think that that's been really, really helpful, like using the ball and the sole of the foot. Just, again, if you're not going to walk outside in a minimal foot, you know, shoe, then rolling the sole of your foot out of the ball is a huge, tremendous impact on your foot health.
Yeah. The ball on my foot is a really important thing for me. I spent a lot of time in shoes that weren't the best for me. And really in the last 10 years, I've been able to get out of those, and I'm mostly in natural shoes, but all I have to do is put on a pair of high heels for maybe a party or something. Of course, that was last year. But my feet they need to be rolled out as soon as I get out of those shoes.
Yeah, I love the term, the high heel hangover. I'm like, I feel that. I totally feel that. And it doesn't even have to be a high heel shoe. It could be something just like stiff or narrow or just something out of the norm. And my feet feel like they're kind of scrunched in, so.
Right. I have slowly been getting rid of all of my boots from the Chicago area. But part of it is I bought some new boots that are more flexible because I do go north and I do want to have boots on, but the boots I had were so stiff. My feet were little bricks when they came out of them.
I know. It's a whole thing, right? Like, you're going to end up spending a bit of money and you're going to have to say goodbye to some really cute shoes, But yeah, when I look at them, I have a hard time actually putting them on at this point. I have a couple pairs I'm holding on to. I pretty much never wear them. I stare at them because they're really pretty, and that's about it.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I have sons one is married, and there will be more, and I have wedding shoes now, basically. That's what they're there for.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Or my daughter likes to clomp around in them.
So, special event. Right, exactly. Well, I'm so glad you came on the show because I do think there's a lot of food for thought for my listeners, because I'm not always talking to them about stacking their life. It really hasn't come up in that way. So I love that you've given them some ideas and some opportunities. And do you have one last maybe little thing you do around the house that you might just share as a giveaway?
Things that I do in my house, or
something, whether it's at your kitchen counter.
Oh, like things. Okay, so I'm sitting on the floor. I'm sitting on the floor right now, like on a yoga brick.
There you go.
And you know, so when people listen to this post-COVID, I understand. I want to be thoughtful of that. But I think we're going to be in a digital world for a very long time. So when I teach, this is the room that I teach in. And there's this like big window right in front of me. And I really deliberately try to take these eye breaks. I've been kind of really interested in eye health a lot lately. My son's got some convergence issues. I can tell my eyes have changed when I've stared at screens too long. And so I'm like always trying to take eye breaks whenever I can, of just like, and even as we've been talking, I've been looking up and staring out while I've been thinking and processing. And I just think that's a really smart, simple, free, easy thing to do for eye health.
No equipment needed.
Yeah, and I think it's smart to sit near a window because, first of all, the lighting is better. But secondly, truly that you can just take a moment, stop looking digital, look at the real world, like see the furthest object you can possibly focus on. Like there's a tree that I'm always looking at out here. Yeah. I have to wait a second for my vision to like crisp up a minute, and then I come back. So, yeah.
Right. That's awesome. That's a great tip. I hope everybody does it, and I'll go do it right now as soon as we're done. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I will make sure I gather all your information so we have it in the show notes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been such a great podcast.
Thank you for coming. Yes, I'm so excited.
You're so welcome. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Bone Bootcamp podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're loving the podcast, please subscribe. Also, share with a friend. I would really appreciate it. And if you're inspired, a really helpful thing to do is leave a review on iTunes or Spotify. Thank you again for joining me. See you in the next episode.